Hello and welcome to today's webcast, Funding Government Technology. Today we're going to talk about shared services and shared costs. This is the fourth session in our series where we're exploring a number of topics around funding government technology. My name is Teri Takai, and I am going to serve as the host for today's webcast. Thanks for joining us. We're going to have a great session over the next 30 minutes. Now, we have a few housekeeping notes for you on the screen. Also, during today's webcast, you're going to be able to connect with your peers via LinkedIn and Twitter. For those of you on Twitter, please use hashtag GovTakeLive to talk to each other and to share key takeaways, quotes, and learnings. And at the close of the webinar, we'd like to hear what you think. Now, we also will be taking questions. So if you just drop your questions into the chat during the session, we'll be sure to get them. All right, now joining me today to discuss this topic, I'm so excited to have Jason Clarke, Sabra Schneider, and Nelson Moe. So let me introduce them. Jason began his career in public service in Delaware as a customer relationship specialist. During his career, he played an integral role in developing and implementing many of the state's major technology initiatives. He was appointed by Governor John Carney as acting CIO in September of 2020, and he's responsible for leading the team of more than 300 IT professionals with a collective mission of providing technology services and scalable collaborative solutions that help Delaware provide the highest quality programs and digital government services to its constituents. Sabra Schneider is the Chief Information Officer for the City of Bellevue, Washington. She's served for the past 6 years. Now, I'm excited to tell you that Bellevue was honored in the 2020 Digital City Survey with a first place award, and they have placed in the top 5 for the past 4 years. She's passionate about advancing innovative technology for the public good while supporting a diverse and engaged workforce. And Nelson Moe, who's the Chief Information Officer for the Commonwealth of Virginia, and he's also the leader of the Virginia Information Technology Agency, VITA. He leads a 200-person organization that's responsible for oversight on the IT infrastructure services, as well as governance of the Commonwealth's IT procurements, cybersecurity, and enterprise architecture. He recently led a multi-year transformation of the infrastructure services from a single supplier model to its current multi-supplier model, with 7 suppliers and an integrator. Nelson is also the Commonwealth's IT procurement authority, and in that capacity, he approves RFPs and contracts for IT infrastructure and applications. So everybody's going to have some really great insights on shared services. But first, we want to hear from you. And so we have a polling question related to your challenges around moving to shared services. So let's pull that poll question up now. So what are your biggest challenges? Select all that apply. This is a multiple choice question. Is it developing a cost model for shared services? Is it overcoming agency or department resistance? Is it overcoming the internal staff resistance to shared services? Or is it around finding the right technology partner? Because we all know that shared services sounds like a great concept, but when we actually go out to do the implementation, it isn't always as straightforward as what we might think. Lots of area of concern, lots of area of resistance, and lots of feeling that if I don't control it, how am I going to know that I'm able to get the kinds of services that I really want? Well, for our speakers, we're getting some great participation from the audience. And I think you can see, it's interesting. I think we're getting kind of an equal response from everybody. But it looks like our number one is overcoming agency resistance. So we're going to want to talk about that. closely followed by the cost model and internal IT staff resistance. So we'll close that poll up now with those results, and we want to get to our conversation. All right, so Sabra, I'm going to start with you. There's a lot of different ways of thinking about shared services, everything from having a single mail solution to sharing with in the city, and sometimes actually sharing collaborative outside the city. So what are some of the things that you're doing in shared services, and what do you see as the boundary of shared services for the city?
Great question. And I think it's very interesting that I'm on a panel with two state folks today, because I think kind of a medium-sized city and a state probably have very different views of this. Two very successful and long-term examples that Bellevue has participated in, the first being the eCityGov Alliance. And the eCityGov Alliance is a multi-jurisdictional government nonprofit that Bellevue was a founder of. That includes 6 different cities and serves around 18 different local jurisdictions here in the King County, Washington region. And the primary product for the eCityGov Alliance is a software application called My Building Permit. And around 18 jurisdictions use My Building Permit now, and that's grown over time from the founding partners to the 18 folks that use it now. It is a very collaborative process. We have building officials from all the jurisdictions contributing to what the priorities are for software development, how we want to proceed, in some cases what the rules are. So developers in the region love it because they can go to one consistent platform regardless of which jurisdiction they're in here locally. And cities love it because when things like COVID-19 hit, for example, the My Building Permit cities were very easily able to pivot to providing remote services. So that's an example that I think has been going on for about 15 years, and we've refined a lot of processes and funding and strategies for how to manage it over time. The other one that I'll talk about is the Community Connectivity Consortium, which very similar model, except in addition to including government, it includes some educational institutions, public libraries, and hospitals. And the Community Connectivity Consortium partners to opportunistically deploy fiber in the region. And that's also been a long-standing partnership that allows a lot of public sector entities a great deal of resilience and cost savings in deploying fiber and getting fiber to different buildings. Both models are very collaborative in nature, which I think kind of helps some of the feedback from the folks who are on this call about how do you get buy-in from agencies. And part of it for us was the agency still has a voice and a vote in how that work continues.
Sabra, how is that funded? How is the cost of those initiatives shared?
Sure. The My Building Permit is funded through all of the different partnering jurisdictions and also through the subscriber jurisdictions. And what we do is look at development activity across the jurisdiction. And a couple of examples, we have King County, Washington as a partner, and cities as small as 20,000. So very different in terms of scale. So we look at development costs across a 5-year average. And then we look at the cost of providing the software and the people who program it and the project managers and all of that. And then we divvy it up based on that 5-year average to subscribers and to the partner cities.
Well, Jason, let me go to you. I know you're doing things inside the state. And in many cases, you're sort of embarking on a journey in a lot of different areas. So what are some of the areas that you're looking at in terms of moving to shared services, and how are you working with your agencies? I think you saw in the poll, one of the questions was bringing the agencies on board. So how is that going in Delaware?
Yeah, no, I think those being polled must have a little bit of experience, because for sure, agency resistance and the cost model are two key pieces to driving anything forward, and two pieces that each and every one of us will have to overcome to make it a reality. So for Delaware, we've obviously a small state. We have about 1 million people in total from a population standpoint. And so our workforce is small as well. But we do support all three branches of government. So we have a little bit of diversity in that mix. And one of the things that we have done for quite some time is leverage the single email solution, a single network to support all three groups. We've had those kind of things in place, but we've also had our own IT teams. And so over the past 7 to 8 years, we've really started to target those commodity-based IT services. So one of the things that we've done here in the last 6 months, excuse me, is put together our secure end user service program. And the main reason for that, and it's something I think we're able to expand on what everyone learned during the pandemic. Sabra mentioned everyone who was part of that My Permit app, what they were able to do from a pivot standpoint. We had a very similar experience here when people needed to work remotely from home. Those agencies that weren't aligned, they had to deal with that on their own. Took a lot longer, and a lot of times those are agencies where the staff were being taxed to wear multiple hats, and they couldn't focus on that, right? And so I think the pandemic has really helped in that regard. But our secure end user services, we look at it as kind of the one IT model for a service desk that can answer calls and resolve tickets on that first call. Desktop support. I mean, we just looked at it from the end user experience of our employees and said, what do you need to effectively be a good worker within the state? And what services do we all consume? And I think that comes back to that chargeback and cost model as well. It's a lot easier to talk about when it's services that everyone kind of needs, when it's those one-offs, it starts to get really tricky. And if you think of us with 3 different branches of government, I mean, no matter how you look at it, it could be similar, but there's probably things that are separating us. And so that always makes that conversation quite difficult. So for us, we're really pursuing a chargeback model that is kind of a per user cost. And it's essentially a cost of employment, much like insurance or other employment costs that we might reserve today. We recognize that this is really just the cost of doing business today. And what we can't afford any longer as well is to kind of reside on that same network, but not do things consistently, right? It causes impacts to our security profile, our risk scores, everything. And so those are the items that we're really pursuing. It's those commodity IT currently and making that kind of shared all the way across the state.
I really like what you and Sabra have said. First of all, that to some extent, you don't like this recent crisis that happened, but it certainly did focus everyone's mind on how do you get things done in the quickest way. We didn't really have time to necessarily think about our own turf. We had to figure out what was the best way.
Yeah,
but I
give
think,
an example a lot of times of just the phone, right? The ability to have a soft phone for somebody to take their work number and go home. Business units didn't really think of that immediately. They thought, how am I going to serve the public?
right.
And then, we're here to help support that other role. So I think those are the aspects of the pandemic that really shine through in support of centralizing some of these services.
You're right, Jason. It was really about how do you use that driver as how are they going to be able to service the citizens? Absolutely. Well, Nelson, you have a little bit of a different approach and role. So can you talk about, what is the role of VITA in providing shared services for the Commonwealth? And, what are some of the things that have really worked well in that model?
Yeah, thank you, Terry. Thank you for that question. So for shared services, for our perspective, is I provide a shared services model for the 65 agencies, executive branch agencies for the Commonwealth, and about 55,000 end users. And that ranges from Department of Corrections, Department of Transportation, Department of State Police, behavioral health, and the DMV, and so on, and my own agency. And so that's our shared services. And by statute, the infrastructure shared services like email, servers, internet access, a mainframe, and printing, those are all shared services. I have an integrator that does that. So our shared service model is written by statute, and it drives, like what Jason was saying, the commoditized IT portion of it. So outside agency resistance is pretty much fallen away. They don't care where their data centers. They just want internet access. They want stuff. They want to focus on the application. So DMV and VDOT, they're focusing applications for citizen facing. So that's their differentiator. all that stuff, so for us, the shared services model is on this end. And so my role is to provide that storefront, that brokerage model for all the different agencies, like a food court. Okay. And so we provide it. So some of them are baseline like email, but there's some commoditized services are like that. And some are going to be consumer based or consumption based that individual agency can buy for. We recently rolled out RPA as a service, and that's consumption based. You don't have to buy it, but if you do, here's the model. Here's the cost model. And so for us, we provide that value, going up that value chain. And as the advantage I have is I get a chance to see from a procurement perspective, and it's kind of shepherd saying, hey, we should buy this, we should buy that. So it all aligns pretty well. So from our perspective, Vita's role is to provide that from procurement, from project management, guidance, also services guidance. We have a cloud broker model. Which cloud model works for you? Is it Google? Is it Microsoft? Is it Amazon? Is it Oracle? Here's the RA. So we provide that guidance. Say, hey, yeah, put your stuff over here as long as we can keep track of it. I don't care. I mean, as in the cost model. So that's the thing. So we don't have a whole lot of agency resistance to that now because it's working. They're involved. The agencies, all 65 of them, they're involved in the actual selection and notification and the overall governance of it. So we have, in fact, have a meeting this Friday with the advisor group to talk about here's where we're going, how you like it, and give us advice on any new services you want to roll out. So yeah, that's the advantage that we have. And the services model allows me to bolt on any new ones that come up, like artificial intelligence on the next thing that comes up.
So do you have a chargeback model, Nelson?
Oh, yeah, it's all chargeback. Yeah, we're fully chargeback model, and we follow the ITFM chargeback model and the federal cost allocation guidelines. So yes, fully chargeback, and so the agencies pay us, and we pay the suppliers.
That's great. And that model works, does it not? Even with the different federal funding streams?
Works just fine. Yeah, it takes a crackerjack team to do it, keep track of these things, but they're just fine.
Yeah. Because I think what I've seen is there's often a confusion or sometimes even resistance because there are different funding streams. And so how do you actually make that work?
You keep track of that and you allocate and keep track of it coming in. And so, yeah, but we work with state police, we work with Treasury, we work with Social Security Administration, the entire HIPAA, all those different funding streams, CMS, Central Medicaid Services, all those things. We keep track of all that money.
Now, let's just talk about kind of what you're seeing that are potential areas for shared services that you might be looking at in the future. So, Jason, let me start with you and then go to Sabra.
Yeah, come back to the digital government platforms, I think is a key piece that we're seeing. There's so much that we want to do as a state. And when you think about it from an enterprise perspective, you really all kind of have to move in that same direction, or at least be pulling in that same direction. So things from, the bookends of digital government with single sign-on and the payment checkout process. Just making sure that end user experience, they understand where they're coming in, that they can go to one place and reach multiple services. And when they check out, that feels familiar as well. And I'm not being sent to, 20 different engines to check out. And I have multiple options to pay or whatever it may be. I think that's a key area that has really come out. Another one I think that's been really driven to a certain degree by the pandemic and the number of services that went online and how much consumption and adoption we saw of those online services and how much we continue to see after the fact. Even though our doors have opened back up, even though people can come in and make those purchases, engage at that level, they're continuing to do it online, and we see new customers coming online to pursue those as well. So I think that those types of items really stand out here in the last 6 months.
Well, and I think that's a great example, Jason, because it's all about how does the citizen get a uniform view, and that then drives back to everybody can't be picking their own. Right. There needs to be a shared infrastructure kind of behind that. So, Sabra, let me go ahead, Jason. Sorry.
I was going to say the same kind of applies to cybersecurity for us as well.
Right.
That's one of those universal things at this point. People have come to understand it. They know what it means. They know the impact. They probably know someone who's been impacted in a sister agency, state, whatever it may be. And so that's one of those key ones where as much as you know about it, you may not know enough to actually protect yourself, to mitigate against those dangers, and recognizing the consistency that's needed from one agency to the next. Nelson made a reference to application delivery and things like that earlier. That was probably one of our challenge points in the very beginning, is going in, looking to take over like all of IT from an agency. and coming to the realization that, there are things we're really good at, and then there are spaces that are very custom and defined to an agency, and it's not just a widget that you can pass back and forth. There's much more engagement. But cybersecurity is one of those ones that's kind of a blanket, and it affects so many things, whether it's your bond rating, your cybersecurity insurance, the whole list.
Thanks, Jason. Well, Sabra, let me go to you. What are some of the things that you're thinking of next in the city of Bellevue?
I'd say ×2 to everything Jason said. So I'll add a different direction so that I'm not repeating him. But and slightly different take on it, and that's more on the internal side. We're seeing a much bigger need for sharing data and analytics across departments and across teams in order to drive a lot of the services that Jason described, and to make sure we're getting the kind of value we want to get from the services that we provide to residents. So I see that as a very emerging area in the city, and also with a lot of our shared partners. And the pandemic brought that up as well, right? We all had to figure out how to display data from the county and from the state and from cities in similar ways to have it make sense to the public. I'm also curious from Nelson and Jason, if any of the shared services you're describing are offered to cities or counties in your states.
Nelson, do you want to start there?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things I get to do is I get to have both platform shared services contracts, but also statewide contracts. And so we have a number of statewide contracts that are similar to what we offer to the 65 agencies on what we call a platform. But at the end of the day, in a Commonwealth, a lot of the cities and counties want to do their own thing, but they can leverage some of the contracts out for like cloud services. Printing services is a big one. Network services, audiovisual services. I signed, in fact, I'm being rude. I was looking at my phone. There's any more I got to sign today. I've been out for a week. So there's usually somebody walking the contract for a state service for me instead but in this case, it's shared, and that's a statewide contract they can buy off of. Does that make sense? It's not an integrative. It's so, and then that we seem to be that going forward, though, we might see more getting back to Jason, say more shared services in the cybersecurity area because of the infrastructure bill. We may see something there. And in the meantime, we're rolling out an artificial intelligence as a service along with RPA as a service as a shared service for a consumption model as opposed to a baseline model. But that's not a locality. They may or may not want to buy into that, but I'd have to come up with a statewide contract because they're not. They have to be part of the participating agreement. The localities do before they can buy off it.
Well, Nelson, I want to pursue that because I know, you and I've talked before about the work that you're doing in AI.
Yeah.
And I think that that's an area that all the state and local governments kind of are thinking they're going to get there and sort of dabbling in it. But the governance process for it is really going to be interesting. So, what is it and how are you in the Commonwealth really approaching that?
Well, we're lucky getting back what Jason's saying about some sort of crisis being the mother of invention. We rolled out our robotic processing automation for our unemployment insurance agency because of the efforts to catch up with some of the demand on routing processing forms, and we were able to knock off a process would take hours to do and do it in minutes, and so that really helped them out. So we accelerated that effort. So as RPA as a service is in flight now, we're going to use that same model for artificial intelligence as a service and provide it as a consumption thing and use the same thing from governance, tracking the use cases, the return on investment, making sure that we get feedback from the rollout and then pick a supplier partner set that makes sense. And so it's like going from making one chicken sandwich and then opening up an entire restaurant. Because, hey, we can make chicken sandwiches. We know how to sell them. Great. Or eliminate stand an entire restaurant. There you go. But we see that as an advantage because agencies can say they don't have to hire the staff. It can be offered, getting it back to shared services from your callers. They can, even the smaller agencies can take advantage of this great service. They can just, hey, give me 15 minutes of AI and then walk away.
That's great. Well, let me ask a question around, I think that everyone struggles with, which is kind of around funding models.
Okay.
And let me just ask each one of you, has your budget office and your procurement group been a part of your shared services initiatives, and how have you worked together to really make them successful? So Jason, I'm going to start with you and then go to Nelson and Sabra.
Yeah, so part of our statute, it requires us to have that chargeback model approved by our Office of Management and Budget, as well as our Controller General here in the state. And so we review kind of the total cost of ownership, showcase all of the components and products involved, the people necessary to deliver on that. And that's one piece, as I hear Nelson speak about what Virginia has, and I think it's key as anyone considers how they move forward with the centralization of services, is the ability to be able to scale. Time and time again, we talk about the hardships around workforce and attracting and retaining staff. To put yourself in a position where you offer a great service and product and then demand scales up, you really also want to think about the other side of the equation, such as the Commonwealth of Virginia, where it's essentially brokered, and someone else is able to modify how they need their scope and scalability to deliver on it. But yeah, so in Delaware, 2 kind of checkpoints, and then we kind of go around and work with each of the agencies to make sure they understand the impact statement. Many times they're spending in those spaces already, and we help them identify that and kind of showcase that, the delta is not that big. And that's part of but look at what the value is on the other side of that. And so those are the components that we go through.
That's great. Nelson, how about you? You have a pretty sophisticated model set up.
Yeah.
But you're also responsible for procurement. So how does that all come together?
So in this case, we talked earlier that Teri, you mentioned about how you get the financial model in alignment. And like Jason, we work very closely with our Secretary of Finance and his Department of Planning and Budget for the rates or chargeback rates. we update them we update them formally once a year. And then as far as when we roll out a new service, basically what we do is we basically say, hey, we're basically operating a little bit of, I hate to say profit, but a little ahead of the chargeback model. Okay, so we can take this and roll this new service out and then do this. So we take that reinvestment, we roll it back in. But we coordinate with them, and we also work with the agencies on priorities and then forecasting. Hey, how many Google addresses or Microsoft address licenses you're going to need? And so really having a tight forecasting model with your agencies and have a good relationship with your finance team. Say, hey, here's what this costs. Here's how it's going to work. All good, right? And so that happens, especially now. We're going through our budget cycle for the new governor's budget that's going to get put in December. That's happening. Started in September. Is happening now for a rates check and also a new services check and how we're going to pay for it.
Well, that's great. Well, Sabra, let me ask you, how do you work with your budget and finance and procurement organizations to make shared services work?
Very similar to Nelson and Jason. Again, we do get our models approved. And I would say with the multi-jurisdictional work that we do in the eCity Gov Alliance and in the Community Connectivity Consortium that I talked about early in the call, we have an executive steering committee that will approve any significant changes in scope or scale or funding ahead of time, so that everybody knows that may be coming and everybody's kind of bought into the importance of those potential changes, and then adjust the rate model accordingly. So if we know we're staffing up to do major software development, that sort of thing, then we'll signal that pretty early so that everybody's prepared. And understanding why the cost is going up.
I think that conversation was so important because I think sometimes we think of shared services as a technology issue, but in reality, it's as much around that governance and that funding model as well.
Yeah,
well, I can't believe. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I said the technology is almost the easy part, right?
Teri, I had one more thing. Is that Virginia is almost, at least from an IT perspective, is almost totally an operational expenditure model. We have outsourced. We don't own the data center. We don't own our hardware. We buy them as a service. And so communicating with the agency, hey, here's your service, provide us to internet, laptops, mainframe, it's all as a service. So from a costing perspective and charging perspective, they like it because it's more consistent. They don't have to worry about ups and downs of capital expenditures. And so that helps with the consistency and the cost visibility and the cost transparency going forward. At least they can forecast it out. That's an important thing. I forgot to mention that. We've shifted to we've been that way for years, actually since 2006, I think, but an operational expenditure model.
That's great. Well, I can't believe that we've come to the end of our 30 minutes. It's gone so quickly. And I want to be respectful of our time commitment. So we're going to close up today. Thank you to Nelson and Jason and Sabra for being here today. I'm sure our audience got a lot of great insights. All right, I'd also like to thank our sponsors, Cisco and Meraki, Fortinet, T-Mobile, and OpenText for making it possible to have this important discussion today. And thank you for being a part of it. Now, we want you to come back on December 15th for our next conversation, which is around funding government technology, what a public-private partnerships look like now. All right, well, again, Nelson, Jason, Sabra, thank you so much for being with us. Thanks for being an absolutely great audience, and we will see you soon at the next Funding GovTech session. Everybody have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.